Hey, it's Ross from rosslukeman.com, and today I want to talk to you about 9 mistakes that I've made in my original van build. And these are mistakes that I slowly filtered out, and I no longer do these things today. I've been doing power systems for about 8 years, since 2015, and I've got a little list. Actually, I've got 10 different mistakes here, and this is kind of a sensitive topic because I'm really proud of that first van, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made to just build what I could, and hit the road. And I'm still telling stories. Last night I was telling stories from the road. And so I want to encourage you to go ahead and build what you can, whether it's a van or a school bus, an RV, a boat. Do your project, get out there, don't try to be perfect. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and tear apart what I did on that first project, and hopefully it will be valuable for you. So the first mistake that I made on that first van build is I went with the flexible solar panels and I glued them to the roof. I'll just say they ended up failing about 1 month into my initial road trip, and they were replaced with a glass panel. I've also had students, one of my students, her panels flew off. They were the flexible panels, and the wind got under them and they flew off. So the flex panels, we've had a few failures with myself and some of my students, and then with the panels flying off. I don't mess around with the solar panels anymore. They're gonna be glass and aluminum panels, and I'm gonna bolt them to the vehicle. Use hardware from DIY Van. They have a lot of unique hardware that bolts to the different van models. DIYvan.com, check them out. But yeah, the flex panels, maybe they're better nowadays. I don't mess with them. They tend to charge you double. You know, you're paying $800 for a couple of panels, and the longevity is not there. And I stay away from glue. There's a general tip for you. If I can bolt something down, I don't use urethane or glue. The window weld from 3M is extremely strong, but in general, I just stay away from adhesives if I can in van electrical or just general van conversions. That's mistake number 1 that I did, flexible solar panels. And I'll just say, some people get pissed off if they've done these things and maybe it's working for them. So maybe you have flexible panels and it works for you. Great. You know, I'm just saying things that I no longer do, things I had an issue with. Maybe they stopped working or they were insufficient for my needs, and I've abandoned these things that I did on my original build. But, you know, if some of this works for you, great. Keep doing it. Mistake number 2 is I tried to get by on one charging source. So those flexible solar panels were my only charging source. And this was like late 2014, early 2015. Everybody was all about solar, and I'm still about solar, but I use it as a mix of alternator, solar, shore power. They come into play at different times, and I kind of overestimated what solar could do. I had those, it was 2 100-watt panels. It wasn't enough, especially when they ended up failing. And I'll just say I'm gonna go ahead and take it to one of my other mistakes. I didn't take alternator charging seriously, and for off-grid, you know, solar's going to come in there, but alternator is really going to carry you in a lot of the off-grid scenarios, especially if you're getting to your destination at night and you need to get things charged up. Maybe you're leaving your house and you're going to some kind of park, and you want to charge on the way there. You know, if it's after work on a Friday night and it's dark outside, the alternator is going to do the work. For me, I didn't have alternator charging. Like I said, I put too much onus on the solar to do everything. Eventually, I added the alternator charging, and I added this relay from Blue Sea Systems. Again, this is another hot issue where people get mad. The relay actually worked for me, and what was cool is it would charge in reverse and charge the engine battery off the solar if I left the van at the airport, something like that, out in uncovered parking. So I'd get back after 10 days and my vehicle would start up, you know, very strong, because this charges in both directions. Sterling Power has some newer chargers. This is one of their older ones, but they now have some that charge in both directions. So when the vehicle's just sitting there, the solar power can get through that charger and charge your engine battery. So check those out. But I started putting relays in all my customers' vans, and they had more batteries than I did. They had lead batteries, lead acid, but as they put larger and larger battery banks, when those get depleted, they can suck up a lot of power, and it ended up blowing my fuses. The relays were fine, but my fuses I had put in at the engine battery, I would typically put 100 amp fuses, and when those rear batteries would get low, the current would go over 100 amps for a sustained period of time, maybe 5 minutes, and that fuse would blow, and all of a sudden you don't have alternator charging. So I switched away from the relays, even though it's just a really solid piece of equipment. I wanted to regulate the current, and I started using current regulators like the BMS 12200 from Victron. It would throttle the current down to protect the line and protect my fuse, and use those for a few years, and then I switched to the DC to DC chargers. These are going to throttle the current down, but they're also going to bump the voltage up or down. And so it's the best of both worlds. You throttle the current, protect your fuse, protect that cable, protect your alternator, and you can also bump the voltage up or down and get that full charging cycle, which helps your batteries. So the alternator, it's been a saga. I went from nothing to relays to current limiters to full DC to DC chargers. So I would just say take that seriously for off-grid. You don't want to have to plug in all the time, but when you're off-grid, sometimes, you know, like I said, you're driving at night. When you get to your campsite, maybe you're parked under a tree and it knocks out the solar. It's just you want that second charging source for off-grid. So I'll go ahead and leave it at that. Now, this is actually a good time to mention I have a document that you may be interested in that covers the 3 major charging sources: solar, shore, and alternator power. It's called the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet, and it talks about how, as I said, solar power has times when it gets knocked out at night. The alternator has times when it is not going to contribute anything. When you're parked under a shade tree for a week at a campground, you need to plug in. That's when shore power is going to carry you. So the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet is available. Just click below or go to rosslukman.com/vanpower. It's going to talk about those 3 charging sources. It's going to talk about different battery types and the strengths and weaknesses of those, and it's going to help you narrow in on which battery type is going to be right for your project. And then lastly, there is a really cool diagram that is your entire power system on one page. Shows the 3 major charging sources at the top: solar, shore, and alternator power. And it shows how that power is linked through the system, comes out and charges your batteries, and then gets distributed to your end devices such as your microwave, your laptop, your phone charger. You're going to get a full picture of how that system is put together and what links to what to make it all work. So again, to get your own copy of the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet, all you have to do is click that link below or go to rosslukman.com/vanpower. All right, let's move on to mistake number 4, I think we're on. So I had this little 300 watt inverter, and I was trying to run my iMac computer, which I still have. Great little computer, but I sized the inverter for that iMac, and then I didn't have an inverter charger. I had a little 15 amp charger, so I did kind of have a sneaky second charging source, but the charger was for emergencies. I would run an extension cord through the rear doors of the vehicle, put that charger on, and then clip it onto the batteries. It was kind of hokey. And a 15 amp charger is okay if you're maintaining a small battery at home, but if you have a large battery bank, 15 amps is not enough. So I would say don't even use an inverter, get an inverter charger. So you automatically have shore power. With an inverter charger, you're set up. It's got the inverter, it's got the charger, it's got a transfer switch in there. There is no way I would put a standalone inverter. Again, I may tick some people off saying that. Maybe you put an inverter, it works great. If you have a high quality inverter, it probably has been working for years. But as far as putting that in, you don't have shore power. So now you have to add a charger. You may or may not add a transfer switch so it all plays nice together. It's just, it's a waste of space, and you can get by with, you know, this was maybe $300. And a lot of these mistakes were just buying the cheapest thing. Sometimes it gets you out on the road, which there's something to say about that, but it's going to come back to bite you out on the road. So I would not get an inverter. I would get an inverter charger. And then as far as size, I would size it so you can run something that's 1500 watts, whether that's an electric stove, a blender, 300 watts. It may work for you. If you just have a little laptop, that's 50 watts, you know, 60 watts. But in general, a 300 watt inverter is going to be very, very limiting. So I would get an inverter that can do at least 1500 watts and get an inverter charger right out of the gate. I would not buy a standalone inverter. Mistake number 4, this was me being a little bit cheap and naive. No heating and cooling. So I had the Mr. Buddy heater, the propane heater, but I found in the cold climates, when it was snowing outside, I wanted to open my roof vent to vent the fumes, the carbon monoxide. I didn't know how much carbon monoxide it was putting out, but I didn't want to die in my sleep. So I would have, in your electrical system, I would have a DC air conditioner. Again, it's going to help your sleep. It's going to, climatization, heating and cooling is going to help your sleep, whether it's winter or summer out there. If you're too hot or you're too cold, you're really not going to sleep. This is a high cost, and it'd be nice if we could skip it, but you know, you don't want to be grouchy out there because you're not sleeping well. It's okay to camp in a tent for a few days, maybe 2-3 days, and go home at the end of the weekend. But a lot of times in these vans, people are staying out there for a long time, and if you cannot regulate the temperature in your vehicle, it's gonna cost you. You can follow the seasons. I try to do that to a large degree, but it doesn't always align perfectly, and you can lose a lot of sleep. So I would say a DC air conditioner. I like the Espar and Webasto heaters that run on gasoline or diesel. You can get the Propex that runs on propane, but they're all going to vent to the outside, so you don't have that carbon monoxide buildup. So I will leave it at that. No heating and cooling was a major mistake, a major thing that was missing from my first van. Also, my monitoring systems were very poor. So I had no battery monitor. You have to have a battery monitor as a minimum. That's your minimum power system monitoring. Smart shunt from Victron. You can get the BMV 712. They have some cheaper ones on Amazon if you want to go that route. But I would get a battery monitor. It's going to be like a fuel gauge, so you know what's left in your batteries. The other one that I missed was no water tank monitor. I kind of got by because I had a small water tank and I could open the cabinet and look at the level. That was okay, but I would just say in general, put some monitoring on your system. Battery monitor is the minimum. Oftentimes works really well to hang your tanks under the vehicle. Now you really need a monitor. You can check out my other videos. I have 7 or 8 videos on different monitoring systems for water tanks and temperature. But nowadays I put a battery monitor, and I'll put, you can do the Seamarine Pico. That will also measure your water tanks and your temperatures. And then Victron has the Serbo GX. The Pico and the Serbo are not quite the same animal, but in general they're both excellent monitoring systems. So I would, and check out my videos. I have videos on both of those systems. But monitoring was a major mistake. And I will move on from there. Number 7, this was a real amateur. I had twisted wires. I would take these wires, the red and the black from my 12-volt lines, and I would measure out, okay, we need 13 feet. We would measure them out, and they shrink up a little bit, and I would spin them in the drill to create my line. And oftentimes I needed a second person. Sometimes they were my client, and I would say, you know, you hold the end of the wire with some pliers and we'll spin it. And I'll show a picture. It looks a little bit crazy, but nowadays I'll use the marine cable. So especially for the 12 volt, I have that here. It's going to come in a jacket. It's got the 2 conductors already in one jacket. It's just a lot more professional. It's more flexible than the stranded wire. This is from Home Depot. This is Southwire brand. It's great wire. It's just the marine cable is the marine duplex cable is what they call it. It's a lot more flexible, and it's rated for higher temperatures, I believe. It's got the tin plating, so it's more corrosion resistant. Just in vehicles, that's one of the things is you want to have flexible cables. You're not supposed to use real rigid cables in vehicles because of the vibration. And that was the other mistake I made with the cable. I used Romex from Home Depot. I believe this is also from Southwire. But it's real stiff. It's kind of hard to work with. And it'll do the job, but again, you're in vehicles and in boats, you're supposed to use stranded flexible cable. And a lot of this has the 105 degrees Celsius temperature rating. That's the rating of the plastic jacket. And so it can actually take more current for the same amount of copper than some of the other wires that have a lower temperature rating. So something to keep in mind. The welding cable that's in your main power system, also a lot of that is 105 degrees Celsius. And for the size of that copper, it can take more current than other wire types. So I'll leave that there. Number 8 is breakers in the wrong places. So I've noticed a lot of people come right out of their inverter and they run to their loads. They don't stop at a breaker panel. And I would just say it's good to, this small inverter, it's not too explicit. A lot of them you're going to hardwire your wire in there and you need to go out to a breaker panel. What I did is I put a massive breaker, I'll show a little picture, a massive breaker from my batteries to the rest of the system. I used a Midnight Solar breaker box. And I had this huge, they have different size breakers, but it's up to 250 amps, and it's this huge switch. I would say the cost of that and that giant breaker box, it was not really needed. I thought I could fit everything in there. I could not. It was a high quality piece, but instead of having a breaker as your main cutoff, I would put a fuse for your batteries and a main battery switch. Put the fuse close to the batteries and put the switch, in a convenient location. So that whole breaker box that I used to shut off the batteries was not really needed. And then I had no breaker box on my inverter output. So I would say nowadays this is a PD5000 from Progressive Dynamics. It's got 12 volt DC fuse slots. And then you can put your breakers. This is one place, I do get the breakers from Home Depot. I use the Eaton BR series. They're about $5 to $7 each, and they go in here. And this is a 30 amp breaker box. But in general, if I had had a breaker box, I could have split off my lines and had outlets, at least outlets down the driver's side and the passenger side. With this one, I just ran a plug to the other end of the van where I had another outlet where I plugged into. So I had one outlet at the other end of the van, and then I had no breakers. So I would say have a breaker box on the output of your inverter. So I'll leave that there. Number 9, dimmers. I've said this in some of my other videos. I'm kind of passionate about this one. You need dimmers on your 12 volt lights. I had these little lights that had an onboard switch, but I tell you what, in the morning when you wake up, you don't want the full lights on, or in the middle of the night if you need to get up and get something. I guess you could use a flashlight, but I would turn on those lights and they were just completely off or completely on. So I would just say have dimmers. It can be a knob. You can have the little touch dimmer. Some of them have little remotes. They have all sorts of 12 volt dimmers on Amazon. But in general, even at night when you're getting ready for bed and you want to kind of dim the lights, you're going to want those dimmers. You don't want everything on full brightness all the time. Number 10 is no fridge or water pump. Now, I did add a fridge later. I don't want you to think I'm completely incompetent. But I don't know. The build was kind of inexpensive. This is where it can come back to bite you. You want to spend $5,000 and hit the road, and maybe it should have been $10,000. That was about what I spent, was $5,000 on that first conversion. So with the water pump, the main thing, I had the little hand pump faucet. I don't see a whole lot of people using this, but in general, when I was brushing my teeth, I wanted to have the water running a little bit, maybe. But I had to brush my teeth and then pump the water into my other hand. It was just kind of a mess. So have an electric water pump, I would say. I think most people have got that covered. And then on the fridge, the road food is bad. You can get very unhealthy out on the road without a way to buy groceries and prepare your own food. So I would just say invest in that fridge. I didn't mention a stove here. I had a butane stove, which I kept in the cabinet. I would say build in your stove, build in your fridge. If you want a drawer fridge, some people, they're a little more expensive. You can pull out the drawer and look down. Whatever style of fridge that you think would work for you, I would just say invest in that, because it's going to get real expensive to eat out all the time, and you're going to have trouble finding healthy options. And if you're going to go out there and hike around and explore, you need to be healthy. You need to have some good food, some good nutrients. And if you don't invest in your kitchen area and you kind of go cheap there, I think it's going to come back to bite you, and you're probably going to end up spending a lot more money at restaurants. And if you don't have heating and cooling, you're going to spend more money at coffee shops, because you're going to have to get out of there during the day to get that climatization. So some of these things, if you go cheap on the build, you end up spending the money out on the road. But that is my list. It ended up being 10 different mistakes. I hope that was helpful for you. And it's sensitive to tear apart your first van build. You want to be proud. You are proud of that first van build, but oftentimes the first time you do something, you're going to make mistakes. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Now, if you want more information on your van or RV power system, again, pick up a copy of the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet. All you have to do is click that link below or go to rosslukeman.com/vanpower. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.